Well, hello there, and welcome to my kitchen table, a place in most homes where we can sit and talk for hours with family and friends, putting the world to rights, as my dad would say, or as I like to say, having a bevy with the girls and just chatting shit. Right, let's see where we're off to. We're off to New Jersey, which is one of the wealthiest states in the US, consistently ranking as one of the top three by average household income. Almost one tenth of the 3.3 million residents are millionaires, the highest representation of millionaires amongst all states. Now, I for one didn't know that until I was doing research, obviously. I would have thought it was somewhere like Texas, but I can't be right all the time. So, if you're ready, take a seat and I'll tell you a story. Born in Bay City, Michigan, September 17th, 1925, John List was the only child of German American parents John Frederick List and Alma List. Like his father, List was a devout Lutheran and a Sunday school teacher. He graduated from Bay City Central High School in 1943, and that same year he enlisted in the United States Army. He actually served as a laboratory technician during World War II. After List was discharged in 1946, he enrolled at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where he gained a degree in business administration and a master's degree in accounting. This was not a stupid man. In November 1950, when the Korean War was raging, basically it was escalated at that point, List was recalled to active duty. At Fort Eustis in Virginia, he met Helen Morris Taylor. Now, Helen was actually the widow of an infantry officer who was killed in action in Korea, and she lived nearby with her daughter, Brenda. John and Helen married on December the 1st, 1951, in Baltimore, Maryland, and the family moved to Northern California. The Army, recognising List's accounting skills, reassigned him to the Finance Corps. After completion of his second tour, List worked for a firm in Detroit, then a company in Kalamazoo, where his three children were actually born. And by 1959, he'd actually risen to general supervisor of the company's accounting department. But Helen, by now an alcoholic, had become increasingly unstable. In 1960, the stepdaughter Brenda got married and she left the household. And List moved with the remainder of his family to Rochester, New York, to take a job with Xerox, eventually becoming Director of Accounting Services. Told you he wasn't stupid. In 1965, List accepted the position of Vice President and Comptroller at a bank in Jersey City, New Jersey, and moved with his wife, his three children, and his mum to a house called Breeze Knoll. Well, it wasn't a house, it was actually a 19-room Victorian mansion, located at Hillside Avenue in Westfield, New Jersey. Oof. On November the 9th, 1971, John List murdered his entire immediate family using his 9mm 1912 semi-automatic handgun and his father's Colt .22 revolver. While his children were at school, he shot his wife Helen, 47, in the back of the head. He then moved up to his mother, Alma, 84, and he shot her just above her left eye. As his daughter Patricia, who was 16, and his younger son Frederick, who was 13, returned home from school, he shot them both in the back of the head. After making himself lunch, because apparently annihilating most of your family makes you hungry, List drove to the bank to close both his and his mother's bank accounts. He then went on to Westfield High School to watch his elder son, John Jr., who was 15, play in a soccer game. What a great dad. After driving John Jr. home, List shot him repeatedly. As evidence later showed, his son attempted to defend himself. List placed the bodies of his wife and his children in sleeping bags on the mansion's ballroom floor. He left his mother's body in her apartment in the attic. He wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, which was found later on his desk in his study. And he claimed that he saw too much evil in the world and that he had killed his family to save their souls. Well, I guess that makes everything okay then. He then cleaned the various crime scenes, removed his own picture from all family photographs in the house, tuned a radio to a religious station, and left. The murders weren't discovered until December the 7th, nearly a month later, due in part to the family's reclusive tendencies, because his mother was stuck in her attic. Helen was an alcoholic, didn't move over the door, and her 3 children went to school and then went on to part-time jobs, so they had no friends. And List worked every hour God sends. But also in part to notes sent by List to the children's schools and part-time jobs, saying that the children and Helen would be visiting their ailing maternal grandmother in North Carolina for a few weeks. Now, Helen's mother was ill, and she had actually cancelled a trip to Westfield because of it. In fact, later, List said if she'd have made it to Westfield, then she would have been victim number 6. He'd also stopped the milk, the mail, newspaper deliveries, etc. But neighbours noticed that all of the mansion's rooms were all lit up, day and night. But there's no apparent activity throughout the house. After the light bulbs began burning out, or popping, one by one, they called the police. Officers entered through an unlocked window leading to the basement and began to search the house, and they discovered the family's bodies. All reliable photographs of List had been destroyed. They didn't even know what he looked like. The family car was parked at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City, but police found no evidence that List had ever boarded a flight. Alma's body, that's his mum, was flown back to Michigan and interred at the St. Lawrence Lutheran Cemetery. Helen and the 3 children were buried at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield. In 1971, as the FBI later discovered, List had actually travelled by train from New Jersey to Michigan, then to Colorado. He settled in Denver in early 1972, and he took an accounting job under the name Robert Peter Clark, also known as Bob, which was actually the name of one of his old college classmates. In 1979 to 86, he was the comptroller at a paper box manufacturer outside Denver. He joined a Lutheran congregation and even ran a carpool for members of the congregation without transport. At one religious gathering, he met an army clerk named Dolores Miller, and they were married in 1985. In February 1988, the couple moved to a house in Brander Mill neighbourhood of Midlothian, Virginia, where List, still using the name of Bob Clark, resumed work as an accountant at a small accounting firm. In May 1989, the 18-year-old crime was recounted on the Fox television programme America's Most Wanted. This was during their first year on air. The segment featured an age-progressed clay bust sculpted by forensic artist Frank Bender, which turned out to bear a very close resemblance to how List actually looks. On June 1st, less than 2 weeks after the broadcast, List was arrested at a Richmond accounting firm after a Denver neighbour recognised recognised the bust, basically, and alerted authorities. Although John List actually continued to stand by his alias for several months. No, I'm Bob Clark. Even after his 1989 extradition to Union County, New Jersey. Finally, faced with the irrefutable evidence, including a fingerprint match with his military records, as well as evidence found at the crime scene, he confessed his true identity in February 1990. List gave critical financial problems, as well as his perception that his family members were straying from their religious faith, as his motivations for the murders. He believed that killing them would assure their souls a place in heaven, where he hoped to join them. At trial, List testified that his financial difficulties reached crisis level in 1971, when he was laid off with the closure of the Jersey City Bank. To avoid sharing his humiliating development with his family, List engaged in the same routine and dress as when he was employed, leaving home each morning on schedule and spending the day at job interviews or at Westfield train station reading the newspaper until it was time to go home. He diverted money from his mother's bank account to avoid default on his mortgage. As the year progressed, the family's financial problems became more strained. He encouraged his children to seek part-time work, ostensibly to teach them maturity and responsibility, but it was actually to keep the family financially solvent. He was also dealing with his wife's alcoholism and her untreated syphilis, contracted from her first husband and concealed for 18 years. According to trial testimony, Helen had pressured List into marriage by falsely claiming that she was pregnant, then insisted that they marry in Maryland, which did not require the premarital syphilis test mandated in most other states at the time. Though her health progressively deteriorated, she said nothing to List or her physicians until 1969, when a thorough examination revealed the condition. By then, progression of the disease combined with her excessive alcohol consumption had, according to testimony, transformed her into an unkempt and paranoid recluse, who frequently and often publicly humiliated List, comparing his sexual prowess unfavourably with that of her first husband. Yes, your first husband who gave you syphilis. Oh. A court-appointed psychiatrist. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. A court-appointed psychiatrist testified that List suffered from obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, and that he saw only two solutions to his situation: accept welfare or kill his family and send their souls to heaven. Welfare was not acceptable as an option, he reasoned, because it would expose him and his family to ridicule and violate his authoritarian father's teachings regarding the care and protection of family members. So shooting them in the head doesn't? Oh my word. On April 12th, 1990, List was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing, he denied direct responsibility for his actions. He said, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer." The judge was unpersuaded. John Emil List is without remorse and without honour, he said. After 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days, it is now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Frederick, John, and Patricia to rise from the grave. And he imposed a sentence of 5 life terms to be served consecutively, the maximum permissible penalty at the time. List filed an appeal of his convictions on the grounds that his judgment had been impaired by post-traumatic stress disorder due to his military service. Now bear in mind, his military service, he was a lab technician, first time round. Second time round, he was an accountant. How'd you get PTSD from that? He also argued that the letter he left behind at the crime scene, essentially his confession, was a confidential communication to his pastor and therefore inadmissible as evidence. The Federal Appeals Court rejected both arguments. I wonder why. List eventually expressed a degree of remorse for his crimes. He said, "I wish I'd never done that." He told Connie Chung in 2002, "I've regretted my action and prayed for forgiveness ever since." When asked why he did not take his own life, he said he believed that suicide would have prevented him from going to heaven, where he hopes to be reunited with his family. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but come on, he's just murdered all his family, and he thinks that he can't kill himself because he won't go to heaven. What kind of mixed up thinking is that? This died of complications from pneumonia, aged 82, on March 21st, 2008, while imprisoned at St. Francis Medical Centre in Trenton, New Jersey. Thank you so much for letting me tell you this story, and thank you so much for listening. If you've got any comments, please don't be shy. Get your fingers working on the keyboard. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's free, after all. And if you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours. I've been Sue, TTFN.